Okay. Hi. Good morning. Just today, again, we're going to have another awesome presentation. And today we had the privilege to have Jody, and she's a family navigator with a special lead clinic. And it was 2018 with IFLTI graduation, and she lived near to Amana with her husband and 4 children, which range from 5 to 17-year-old. Her daughter has a Nun syndrome, and her son has a heart disease. And those situations brought her to her world, and especially care needs and personal levels. Her passion for supporting others and similar journals has led her into proceed with the work, this work professionally. Jody has a background in social work and volunteers with national organizations, but not afraid to provide peers and for support, and expecting parents facing difficulty prenatal diagnosis. And so that's who we want to hear today from her. And we're anxious to hear her presentation, but also we have another amazing one, Clementine. She's a family navigator with a special clinic at the Regional Autism Assistance Program, as well as in 2018 of the Iowa Family Leadership Training Institute. Clementine is explaining that she has found her way into the family leadership from this mini misstep, and she took in caring for her 16-year-old son who is affected by autism spectrum disorder, and desire to see no one suffering the same errors. Her passion and outstanding for neurodiversity stem from both from her son as well her own disabilities. Clementine and her family use her supplements and a diet to achieve many of medical's goal. Her home is in Des Moines with her husband and her 2 children still at home, and her dog and 2 cats. And so welcome both of you today, and we are so glad and anxious to hear and learning from you.
Thank you, Dayreen.
Thank you to be with us.
I think folks who need the interpretation are in the channel, Jody, so you can go ahead and start.
All right, well, thank you, Dayreen, and welcome to all of you. We're just delighted to have you with us today to share in this conversation regarding shared decision making. And just to begin today, I think we just want to get a sense of who's with us today, get a little sense of, get to know a little bit about you, and we ask that you would humor us and participate just as fully as you are comfortable today. And to begin, if you wouldn't mind just dropping something in the chat, think about something that you really enjoy doing. It could be anything at all, just what's something you really enjoy? Drop those things in the chat. We'll get an idea of who's with us today.
We've got some great ones here. I'll read them. I see baking, quilting, reading, traveling, biking, sitting at the lake, hiking. Wonderful. Cooking. This is a great group. Spending time with family.
Awesome. You guys give me lots of ideas for how I'm going to spend my afternoon maybe, huh?
Connecting with families. Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And before we begin, if you think, go a little deeper for me here and think a little bit about something you might consider yourself an expert at. Okay, so maybe not just something you enjoy, but what's one thing that maybe you would say you're an expert in that area?
Bottle feeding calves. That's great.
Awesome.
Finances for my family. Complement mediated renal disease.
Mhm.
Cooking.
Thank you for sharing. Ooh, I want to get to know you. Yeah, if you're like me, that is a little bit harder of a question to answer. I think there's lots of things we like to do, maybe less that we feel qualified to call ourselves an expert at. And so by the end of this presentation, we really hope that you will all believe that as parents of children with special healthcare needs, you are also the experts on your children. So that's our hope for you today. And in addition to that objective, we also hope that today you will be able to recognize elements of family-centered care, identify the key components of shared decision-making, and apply strategies to partner in decision-making. Respect yourself and others will respect you. Consider for a moment what that quote might have to do with us as parents of children with special health care needs and empowering our voices as family members. Respect yourself and others will respect you. I invite you to share any thoughts you might have about that. You can unmute yourself and chime in. You can chat it in if you're more comfortable with that, but what kind of connections are you making with this quote as parents of kiddos with special health care needs?
You need to respect yourself or you will not be able to advocate for your child, especially if you're dealing with, a medical community. And I would always speak up for my son. It's so funny how sometimes they would just not even listen to what I was saying. And then other providers, were right on top of what I said. So I think that, you have to have that confidence to portray that you are really advocating for your child.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Beth, for sharing that perspective. So we really believe that families are the experts on their own children. And so we need to bring that expertise to the decision-making table, like Beth said, when we meet with our providers, and really need to own our experience and expertise and believe in the value and importance of our voice in order for others to consider and honor our input and perspectives. So I say we're experts on our children, right? You might be asking yourself why I would say that, or how we could possibly be qualified as experts. I'll offer you what I think are some key points that make us experts on our children. Number one, the time spent with our children. If you just think about the sheer quantity of time you spend with your kids and compare that to the time that any provider might spend with them, just massive quantities of time with our children we spend, don't we? And then not only just that quantity of time, but experiences, time spent across a variety of circumstances. So I know my daughter when she's well rested. I spend time with her when she's tired, two different kids, when she's hungry, when she's comfortable, when she's well fed, when, across all those situations, I experience her. Whereas providers, they see our children like that snapshot when they're in the office. And so the quantity and then the time spent across various circumstances is something really important for us as parents. And then we as family members also have a unique understanding of our family culture, that culture that consists of the history of the family, the values of the family, experiences we've had. Families know what supports they have in their back pocket, the challenges that they're facing. And again, providers aren't aware of that unless we bring them into that world. And then as parents, we have a long lasting and special bond with our children that's really unique to that parental relationship. And so often parents are more invested than anyone else in our child's needs and outcome because of that special bond. And then finally, the concept of intuition, this keen sense when something's off or just not quite right with our kids. And maybe from all that time we spend getting to know them so well, or perhaps other factors, but it just seems that parents often have this sense of intuition in regard to their children. And literature supports the importance of parents passing on this expertise that we've kind of identified here and sharing it with providers through, showing examples of what our children are doing, passing on narratives and stories. Parents can really bring perspective to the provider that they might not otherwise have. So if families are experts on our children, then it stands to reason that centering the system of care around families would be a desired model of service delivery. So let's explore what that might look like. Okay, so this graphic that you see here, it represents the system of care for children and youth with special health care needs. So you'll know, looking there, that the families are really at the center of that system of care, right? And that bluish grayish ring there represents the community entities that serve families, while the outside arrows in the green kind of show the system interaction that ultimately impacts the services the families are receiving and their life as a family. So to partner with providers, we need to understand the system of care for children with special health care needs. And we wanted to talk a little bit about some definitions and concepts relating to system of care to get a more complete look at that. And there was a handout sent to you, I believe, by email, and it's also been dropped in the chat. You can reference. It's called Putting Families at the Center of Care. And that will kind of outline these definitions, so you don't need to feel like you need to take notes or memorize this all. So our nation's governmental agencies for families offer definitions and award grants to those entities that abide by system of care principles. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, offers this definition seen here. A system of care is a spectrum of effective community-based services and supports for families and youth with or at risk for mental health challenges. It is organized into a coordinated network, builds meaningful partnerships with families and youth, and addresses cultural and linguistic needs. A system of care helps children function better at home, in school, in the community, and throughout life, if it's working properly, right? So in a proper functioning system of care, the family really drives the care planning process, and youth need to be a part of those care planning decisions to the extent that they are able. This concept of placing families at the center of the system of care for children can be referred to as family-centered care. Makes sense, right? And the Health Resources and Services Administration, or HRSA, defines family-centered care, as seen here, an approach to the planning, delivery, and evaluation of healthcare whose cornerstone is active participation between families and professionals. Family-centered care really recognizes that families are the ultimate decision makers for their children, with those children gradually taking more and more of this decision-making on themselves as they're able. So now that we know what family-centered care is, let's take a look at why it's important. And I am going to kick things over to Clementine.
Hello, yes. So why do you suppose family-centered care is important? we look to the research, and people who know me know that I really like research. So I looked at these studies a little closer. Waymeyer and Palmer did a study and found in 2003 that students and their families that helped shape their plans for transition to adulthood fared much better across multiple categories, including employment, financial independence, and independent living. In another study written by Osher, and Blau from 2006, their study found that outcomes are better when families have a key voice in decision-making. Families know what works for them. Families focus on the concrete challenges that they face all day and every day. Families know their strengths and their own limitations. Families can see change in how they or their child are doing on a daily basis. They know how a program or agency works for their family or doesn't. And most importantly, without family comfort and participation, children and youth won't participate in the services. And the last study I'm going to look at is by Morrissey, Kane, and Prins, 1999, and they replicated a similar thing in 2008. And they found that the parental beliefs and expectations influence 3 aspects of treatment: help seeking, participation, and outcome. So if you find yourself rolling your eyes at a proposed treatment plan, it's predictable that you also won't seek further support and the treatment results won't be great. So what does family-centered care look like? The principles of family-centered care: information sharing, mutual respect that honors cultural diversity, family values, traditions, and spirituality, providers and families that partner together. Medical care plans are flexible and there is room to make changes to meet the family's needs. Care and decisions reflect the child within the context of family, home, school, daily activities, and other family priorities. Finally, when truly family-centered care is offered, families are asked to provide feedback and perspective. This might take the form of surveys pertaining to care experiences or family advisory boards to provide family voice in decision-making and policy development. A note about family advisory councils: it is not enough to put a token family member on a council or board. The family member needs to be prepared and empowered to bring the family voice to the table. And then their voice needs to be heard and valued, not just lip service to serving families. And an excellent opportunity for those of you who might be interested in further training in order to serve in this capacity is offered by Family Voices, Serving on Groups. You can, and I'll put this in the chat, but you can find that at www.servingongroups.org. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton back to Jody.
Great. Thank you, Clem, for sharing. I wanted to offer you a sort of a practical example or real life example of family-centered care in my own family story. And one experience easily came to mind as I reflected on the above principles that Clem shared of family-centered care, particularly the concept of reflecting the child in the context of their family, their home, their quality of life. And so to illustrate that, let me introduce to you our daughter, Gianna. Gianna Hope was born at 36 weeks gestation following a pregnancy filled with concerns about her health. It came as a great relief and joy just to meet her, but her early days would also bring with them many concerns, and she spent the first 46 days in the NICU. That time included an unexpected surgery and many tests and procedures and questions. It was also highlighted by a struggle with feeding and growth, which kept us in the hospital longer than anything else she was dealing with. So with 3 big kids at home, I was uber motivated to get her eating and growing and get her home to be with her family, get me home too to be with those children. And her feedings all along had been supplemented by NG tube, so nasal gastric tube through her nose. And after a month and a half or so, her team was satisfied enough with her oral intake that the tube was removed and she was welcomed home. But I don't think maybe her team realized how hard we were working behind the scenes to get her to take, every little last drop of those feedings, and feedings were taking longer than they should have. And Gianna was really needing support with the mechanics of feeding and sucking, and she just wasn't an efficient eater. It was a lot of work for her, which was so different from my other children. But what happened was, though we were delighted to be home, after being home for a while, she just couldn't keep up with those feedings and her nutritional needs over time. And so I remember how stressful that was, having a baby that simply wouldn't eat enough for her own good. And we tried lots of things, and ultimately we were feeding her every 2 hours, sometimes sooner, around the clock. And I was pumping in between feedings, and by the time I was done, supplies were cleaned up, it was almost time to start feedings again. And I'd set my alarm in the night for the next feeding so I didn't sleep through it, and my phone would notify me when I set it that my alarm would sound in like 37 minutes or something like that. And so I'd get a few of those little rest periods each night. And I was really exhausted, obviously, but even more so just really worried about my girl. I just didn't know how to help her, when she wouldn't eat. And so during this time, we had a follow-up with cardiology, as she had a recent heart cath procedure, and we wanted to make sure nothing was going on there that was affecting her feedings. And so what we found, tests showed that really her cardiac situation shouldn't be causing her extensive feeding troubles, which of course was a relief, but it was also like, that doesn't really help the problem that we're facing. And so I'll never forget our family-centered care success story here. The dear cardiologist who informed us that they wanted to get a swallow study for her and do some additional testing that couldn't be done until Monday. I don't know about you guys, but this was on a Friday, and in my family, it's always a Friday or a holiday when something goes down. And but that cardiologist, he didn't see Gianna just as a cardiac patient who checked out okay and needed to follow up with some other providers next week. He really saw her as the daughter of a loving and worried mama who could no longer think straight due to this mean combination of sleep deprivation and anxiety relating to what she was experiencing. So this doctor offered to admit her for the weekend if we would like, drawing to our attention that the needed testing really couldn't be scheduled until the following week. But he wanted to offer me rest, and he wanted me to have peace of mind that someone else had their eyes on her too. I truly think, looking back, that he admitted me maybe more than he admitted her. But he saw my stress and needs and offered Gianna care in the context of that reality. So in the hospital, Gianna resumed NG tube feeds, which actually came as a huge relief, and was eventually discharged home with tube feeds to supplement her oral intake. And I'll share a little bit more on that journey later on, but I hope this has illustrated kind of what family-centered care can look like, how important it can be. I know it's been much appreciated in our family. Okay, so we're going to move on and just ask you to participate in a little activity with us here. If you're able to, you can either use a reaction thumbs up on your Zoom feature, or just give us a physical thumbs up if you have your camera on. If you can't see other faces, you might want to consider switching to gallery view, making that little window larger so you can see all the great people we have on with us today. So I'm just going to read off for us some scenarios, and I want you to give me a thumbs up if you think this is a good example of family-centered care. Okay. I'll try to give plenty of time for interpretation here also. Not my strong point, is it? All right, so scenario 1, occupational therapy sessions are arranged according to the family's schedule. Family-centered. Yeah, I see some thumbs up there. So honoring the family's scheduling needs is important. A family must bring their child to the office for case management services. Let me think about that. A couple thumbs up, I think. I like the idea that the child is getting case management services, but perhaps it could be done in a more family-friendly manner, via telephone, home visits, somewhere in the community that would work for the family. So some options there. A complete assessment is done on a child and family. I think family-centered. See lots of thumbs up popping up too. Yep. Again, I think this is kind of a tricky question, but complete assessment I think is great. If you look real careful at the wording, the assessment is done on a child. Have you guys, can you relate to being in that situation where, you know, the process is conducted at you instead of with you? And so perhaps a little tricky with the words there, but the assessment being done with the family, with their participation is ideal. Childcare is provided for the brother and sister while the child with special needs receives treatment. Y'all probably afraid I'm going to trick you again. See lots of thumbs up, and yeah, I would be all on board with childcare for medical appointments. The office hours of the dentist are Monday through Friday from 9 to 4. Yeah, I'm not seeing many thumbs there. All right, so yeah, again, building in some flexibility for parent schedules is important. Parent support groups may use the facility's conference room in the evenings. Promised to give enough time for interpretation. I don't think I've been allowing you much time, but so everybody, I've seen some thumbs here. So right, would be a great support to families. Oop. I lost my window. There we go. Well, that was a fun game, guys. We're just gonna end it right there. I was having a little technical hang up, but I appreciate you participating. And I think we are getting a pretty clear idea of what family-centered care looks like. So you might recall us mentioning earlier that the cornerstone of family-centered care is active participation between families and professionals. A family-centered approach to care recognizes that families are the ultimate decision makers for their children. And this particular aspect of family-centered care is referred to as shared decision-making. So the quote that you see on this slide is from Patricia Deegan. She is a disability rights advocate, a psychologist, and a researcher. She's also an adult peer with a mental health diagnosis living in recovery. So we're going to take a look at the concept of shared decision-making through her lens, just by reading this quote about her experience. Meeting with a psychiatrist during medication appointments is usually a very disempowering experience. The meetings usually last for 15 to 20 minutes. And during the meeting, you're expected to answer a few perfunctory questions and leave with prescriptions for powerful drugs that can dramatically alter the quality of your life. In these meetings, the psychiatrist assumes a position of power, and you usually fulfill the expected role of being a quiet, unquestioning, passive patient. Subsequently, you will be praised for merely being compliant or scolded or punished if you fail to comply with the prescribed medications. So if we gave that a thumbs up or thumbs down in our scenarios, it doesn't sound like a particularly family-centered approach, does it? Any thoughts? Anybody cares to share about how that sounds? You can chat in or unmute yourself if you have thoughts about the family-centered nature of appointments like that, or maybe any experiences you can relate to. Okay, well, feel free to chime in if something comes to mind. But over the years of appointments like this that Deegan had with providers and observing those tendencies, she developed strategies for changing the power imbalance with providers. Ultimately, her approach encouraged effective shared decision-making. Shared decision-making is based on the concept that when the doctor and patient meets, there are two experts in the room. Each is equal, the child or family with a diagnosis and the provider. So we talked about this, right? Your experts, we're experts of our family, of our child, of our situation. And the doctor also is an expert of the medical situation, right? This slide offers another way to define shared decision-making that I really like. The conversation that happens between a patient and their healthcare professional to reach a healthcare choice together. That is the essence of shared decision-making. And I'm wondering, in your experiences, if that's something that you're used to, engaging in conversation with providers to make decisions. Is that something common for you? Is it not so common for you? So I want to just offer a little poll to see kind of what our experience is in this group. Generally speaking, and I know it varies from provider to provider and depending on the situation, but generally speaking, do your child's providers tend to ask for your input? Dan's going to launch a poll for us here and we'll see what the consensus is.
I'm sorry, Jody, the poll is not in my system to call up as possible. Maybe you could read it and have people chat in their answers. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's okay. Okay. That's all right. So yeah, just I guess in that regard, do your child's providers generally ask for your input? Could be beyond yes or no, like usually, rarely. What are your thoughts? Or you can even just unmute yourself and talk about how that tends to go for you.
We've got a yes and no, usually, not always, and yes, usually. Yes, and sometimes no.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I feel like hearing both sides of that makes me feel as a family member, that what I've experienced is valid. Other people have the same experience as me. And also, if I haven't really been the recipient of shared decision-making, hearing people say that they have gives me hope and realization that that's possible, that that's a thing I can ask for, right? So thanks for sharing those thoughts. I'm going to move along here and look at a little closer at the concept of shared decision-making. Mental Health America says that shared decision-making is a process with 3 steps. So we're going to look at those here. The first step is education. So you educate your doctor on your symptoms, complaints, other health issues, right? Whatever you're the expert of, you bring that. In addition, you talk about your personal goals and preferences, and the doctor in turn educates you about a diagnosis, possible treatments to choose, risks and benefits, and that sort of thing. Note again that there are 2 experts in the room when this is going on. You, the expert of your family and child and life, and the doctor, the expert on health conditions and how to treat them. The second step is exploration of the options the doctor presents. So how do you feel about those recommendations? Do you have questions, concerns? And then based on your input, the doctor responds to you with additional information and recommendations. And in the final step, you and your doctor come to an agreement on which option to choose and what steps you will take after the appointment. And to illustrate for us an example of how we can engage our providers in shared decision-making and why these steps might be important, I'd like to invite Clementine to share from her experience as Dashiell's mom.
So first, I'm going to go into how I did it in such a way that it didn't work. I had taken my son to an internal medicine appointment, and the doctor determined, after we had all talked together, she decided that she was going to put him on a pharmaceutical. And it was then, after she had already felt that she had met our needs, that I pointed out to her that, in fact, we would like to avoid pharmaceuticals and we actually prefer working with plant compounds. She was a little offended and she felt like her time was wasted probably. And she was frustrated and she was angry. And, what happened in our relationship was that eventually she fired my family for non-compliance. So that was a situation in which everybody was frustrated and angry. I learned from those issues, and now I go into every medical appointment with a little bit of a script in my mind. And I say, my name is Clementine, this is Dashiell, my son. I know his medical conditions pretty well, and we welcome you to our family team. And we're enthusiastic about what you're going to be able to do for him. Just know, please, that we particularly like to avoid pharmaceuticals where we can, because he reacts badly to them often. And we are eager to see where this goes. And by letting the doctor know that we are welcoming the doctor to the team, that we have a place at the table already, it really sets the stage for my voice and my husband's voice to be considered. And I don't literally always start with that little speech, but I have never regretted it.
Thank you so much, Clem. Great example of how we can literally write the script, right, for our involvement with our children's care. So love that. And the benefits of doing so, the benefits of taking that step and engaging providers in shared decision-making are many. And so we want to take a look at that right now. First of all, teamwork really pays off when you and your doctor decide together what to do next. It's just satisfying to have a chance to talk about your wants and needs and help choose what's best for your child. And so both patients and doctors tend to be more satisfied with the outcomes. And the more you're involved in deciding what to do, the more likely you are, like Clem shared before with the research, to stick to the plan. Because, right, I helped decide on this plan. It makes sense to me. I'm going to stick to it. So it can really pay off in the long run. Deciding together builds trust and improves communication between you and your doctor. And that trust and respect is really essential for the child to thrive in the way, all the ways that are possible. So you need to be able to trust your providers to be an expert and to give you good advice and to listen to you. And your provider needs to trust you to give an honest picture of what's happening in your child's life, in your family, and also trust you to follow through with the treatment you agreed to. And finally, teaming up with your provider to decide together can be empowering. You have an active role in your child's health, and you choose a treatment that fits best with your personal goals for your child. You know that you're being listened to and respected. So in order to highlight just how impactful shared decision-making can be, I wanted to share with you another nugget from our family story. So I'm going to share here. I'm going to make sure I have the sound shared. I'll try and caption this here. Oh, there we go. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm going to give Adrian a little break. He's had to try to keep up with my quick speech. So we'll get this subtitled into Spanish.
When our daughter Gianna came home from the hospital at 2 months old with an NG tube to supplement her daily feedings, it was an adventure. I thought I'd overcome the greatest challenge when I hesitantly learned how to place her tube, but it soon became apparent that managing those feedings and the associated vomiting would provide a great challenge of its own. We discovered that running feeds slowly and reducing Gianna's movement and activity after feedings would help with our attempts to reduce vomiting, but still she experienced it several times a day. I wondered how she could possibly grow when so much of her nutrition was being scrubbed off the floor or tossed in the laundry. Plus, I couldn't help but wonder how limiting her activity and movement throughout the day was affecting her overall development. As Gianna grew, I noticed she began to tolerate her ordered feeds better, but when it was time for the next GI visit, her feedings would be increased to encourage her continued growth, and we would be back to increased vomiting again. I expressed this observation to her GI doctor, but her feedings would always be increased because growth was the goal. I began to dread those visits and the increased feeds and vomiting that I knew would result. Months passed and Gianna found herself in the hospital with an acute GI illness. When the GI doctor on staff at the hospital came in to meet us, he asked us what was going on. I told him about the acute symptoms she was having, but I also filled him in on her struggle with feeding and vomiting. So she's growing as well as she is on the amount that she's been netting? He asked. I will never forget those words. They screamed, I hear you. You are not crazy. Your observations and deductions are valid. We left that hospitalization requesting that this provider become Gianna's GI provider going forward. He understood us and he would fight with us for Gianna's best outcome. In time, we were able to reduce feedings and yet maintain growth since she was able to keep her feeds down. Gianna was able to live more actively each day and even get out of the house on occasion. It wasn't a magic bullet to all of our feeding and growth issues, but having this provider listen and participate in shared decision-making with us truly impacted our quality of life in amazing ways. In time, this provider partnered with us to further reduce feedings, allowing Gianna to experience hunger and therefore increase her motivation and independence with eating. As a result, we were able to wean her from the NG tube and avoid a G tube placement, as we had hoped. The value of family-centered care and shared decision-making cannot be overstated. We are so grateful to have providers who practice it.
Okay. Well, I hope it's easy to see just how beneficial shared decision-making can be. But it's not for use in every situation. And there are a couple of cautions to keep in mind regarding shared decision-making. Shared decision-making should not be used when there is a straightforward treatment or only one treatment option. Right? By definition, there has to be a decision to make. So there needs to be at least 2 medically valid options to choose from. For example, you have a common cold. It's medically known that that needs to run its course. And so it shouldn't be treated with antibiotics. So engaging in shared decision-making over other options in that situation wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. Also, shared decision-making should not minimize the doctor's expertise. So we don't want only the family voice to be heard, right? It's important that we be heard, but we also want to draw on the doctor's expertise and allow them to give expert recommendations, not just like dump some information at us, really make use of their expertise as well. So I'm curious, when we talk about this and we talk about the opportunity and the benefits of engaging in shared decision-making, what you would consider some obstacles to shared decision-making, maybe obstacles that you've experienced in your journey with your children, maybe just obstacles that you could see being, a barrier to shared decision-making. If you have thoughts about what those could be, feel free to unmute yourself or go ahead and drop those in the chat. Anything coming through in the chat, Clem?
Nope, not yet.
Okay, I can't see it here, so.
Oh, hey, time during appointments. That's an important consideration.
For sure. So is there enough time? And actually, conveniently, that's the first point. So lack of time, we know our providers are busy, but I say perceived lack of time because studies have actually shown that engaging in shared decision-making doesn't increase the time spent really by a significant amount at all. It seems like it would, doesn't it? But really, if done right, it shouldn't take too much extra time.
Jody, I have another one here. Doctors sometimes don't listen or feel offended, and waiting in the waiting room too long makes my child so upset that he can't calm down.
Yeah, so then how is mom or dad going to really have these hard conversations and think through these when you're also dealing with child's behaviors and
Doctors' behaviors.
and what's that?
Doctors' behaviors.
Yes. Yep. And yeah, that first point as well. I think that can be a hard balance. Whoever chatted that in, the doctor's maybe being offended, or maybe we're afraid that the doctor's going to be offended. I think that's been my case sometimes. Like I feel like I shouldn't question sometimes, or I have felt that way. Or some doctors maybe, you know, really do want to own that expertise a little bit more, and then don't want to share that decision making perhaps too. So yeah, all of those are experiences that we might have had. This speaks to that, I guess, the lack of confidence and in expertise, lack of confidence in our own expertise, or lack of our perception of the value of our family voice. So maybe again, we don't want to question doctors. Perhaps a misunderstanding of what shared decision-making truly is. Or a perception that families aren't interested in partnering or aren't able to partner. So yeah, families aren't capable of that, right? You know.
Jody, I saw a couple more barriers. Lack of resources for families with barriers like language.
Sure.
And feeling comfortable speaking up on needs.
For sure. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Those are definite realities and challenges. But yeah, I encourage you to keep pushing ahead when you stumble into some of those obstacles. Because an obstacle doesn't mean you can't get past it, right? It means it just takes a little more work to get to that. So I encourage you to continue to persevere and to be the voice for your child that we know is the voice that needs to be heard. All right, so we've examined the elements of family-centered care now. We've looked at shared decision-making, and now we're going to explore some tools that we can use as family members to be sure we have a seat at the table when decisions are being made and that our voices are heard. Now, the first tool for the table is simply build relationships. I can't overstate the importance of that. Those relationships are really central to building partnerships that are conducive to shared decision-making. And, you know, in order to do that, you know, we need to be mindful to respect the professionals that really are experts in medicine, right? And work on building rapport, sharing about our family and child, letting the doctor really get to know your child. And being assertive while still honoring the provider's expertise is an art we can work to master. And avoid burning bridges, I think, when things are difficult. So, you know, try to make partnerships possible wherever you can. Now, the next tool for the table is prepare. So think about your visit before the day of the appointment. If you maybe have quite a bit of time between appointments, you can take notes of things that you might want to remember to tell the provider, things that don't necessarily warrant a phone call or dropping in the office. Take notes for next time. And these two tools here seen on this slide have been emailed to you and also have been dropped in the chat for your reference. Just tools to assist in preparing to partner with providers. The one preparing for our visit to just list out kind of a summary of how the child is doing, what your goals are, what you might want from the doctor today, just to kind of keep you on focus and to share some good information with the doctor that way. And then the tips for team meetings is geared toward youth and preparing them for partnering when they're able to do that. The next tool for the table is ask questions. And here are a few sample questions. I think, you know, just building that confidence and feeling like you have the right to ask a question. That's a big step. It's okay to question the doctor. We do it in a respectful way, right? That helps build that relationship. So questions you might ask would be things like, does my child really need this procedure? What are the risks? What are the other options? Costs, and what happens if we don't do anything? That's always a question that can be asked, right? Doing nothing, I guess, is always an alternative option. So sorting out some of those questions and not being afraid to ask whatever questions you might have. And then finally, the final tool for the table is use the lingo. Okay, so some of these terms that we've talked about today, using the vocabulary can signal to providers that you expect to share in decision-making about your child's health. And if you recall that opening slide that we shared, when we respect ourselves, others will respect us too, and respect what we have to contribute and say. So sometimes, using some of these terms kind of gives you some credibility and helps you to feel confidence. It's okay to request these things. So that really brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with today, and that's nothing about us without us. So if there's ever a decision being made that affects our child and our family, we should be right there at the table with our voices being heard, impacting those decisions. And I just want to encourage you all as family leaders, if you're finding yourself wondering, how does this topic really apply to leadership beyond my own family? Might be on my own child, I assure you that it really does. As I was reflecting on this, I think your willingness to engage your own providers in shared decision-making really sets the stage for those who will come after you. I think it sets a precedent that families can partner in decision-making, and the providers who you encounter will be more likely to offer family-centered care and shared decision-making to those families who come through the door and maybe don't know they can ask for it, or that their voice has value. And so thank you. Thank you for giving value to your voice and advocating for your children. You really are their experts. So that's what we have for you today. We just thank you for being here and for spending this time with us.
So thank you very much for your presentation. I don't know if anybody have any more questions or comments they wanted to do it. You can do it in the box or email, and trying to see if we get the answer for you. So thank you so much, Yuri and Clement.
We hope you can make it next week. We're going to have a little practice session to practice our elevator speeches and see some other tips on how to find the nuggets in our stories to improve our advocacy. Thank you all for attending today. Bye-bye.